Hello guys and welcome back to my channel. My name is Madeline and this is Made with Books. And I was gonna do a mid-month March wrap-up, but I ended up deleting the footage I had because it didn't turn out right. So I'm doing this again and I'm guessing I'm gonna split my March wrap-up into 2 or 3 videos. We'll see how it goes. I'm gonna talk about the first 4 books I read this month in this video, just because I feel like I ramble on quite a bit on the books and then it just takes too long and I don't want these videos to be super long. The first book I read in the month of March, I started in February, and I read it for the Goodreads group Tales & Co. that is hosted by Yemeni from The Skeptical Reader, and I will link below to the Goodreads group so you can check it out if you want to. What she does is she alternates monthly between reading a book by a woman that has been translated into English, and the other month it's always a non-fiction read. And for February it was translated into English and it was Waking Lions by Ayelet Gundar-Goshen. And this has been translated from Hebrew, and I have to look up by whom. So my German edition was translated by Ruth Achlama. But the English translation has been translated by Sondra Silverstone. So if you want to check that one out, it's called Waking Lions. I thought this book was really interesting and I enjoyed it, and I would certainly recommend it. So it is about the neurosurgeon Ethan Green. And Ethan Green has been relocated recently to a hospital in Beersheba. And his career was more on track before that, so he has kind of been sidelined into this hospital where he didn't really want to go in the middle of the desert, because he was sort of trying to act as a whistleblower at his old hospital, and that didn't quite pan out the way he intended it to. So anyway, he and his wife and their 2 sons, they moved to Beersheba, and he's now working in this hospital. And one night, very early on in the book, he decides he needs to blow off some steam, and he takes the car not straight home but through the desert, driving really, really fast. And he accidentally hits somebody, and he hits a man with his car, and he gets out, panicked, to see what happens. And this man has been heavily injured. Now he's a neurosurgeon and he can see there's brain coming out of that man's head. That's not something that can be fixed. And he realizes this man that he just hit on the road is gonna die right there and then. And there's nothing he can do about it. He cannot save him. So he makes the very, very poor choice of leaving him behind. And at this point, I should add, this man that he leaves behind is a refugee. And he figures it's in the middle of the night, nobody saw him there, nobody's gonna know it was him. And it would ruin his career, his life going forward, would ruin everything he has with his family. So he makes the very, very bad choice of leaving. Now what he doesn't realize is somebody actually did see him. And that somebody wasn't just anybody, it was the wife of the killed guy. And her name is Circuit. And Circuit shows up at Ethan's house the other night and tells him that she has in fact seen what he did. Now he of course panics and agrees to meet with her, and he expects her to want money or some sort of other favor, and he's willing to like give her cash and everything to silence her. But it turns out that's not what Circuit wants. What Circuit wants is for him to treat sick refugees. And because he has no choice, he agrees to this, and he starts working night shifts at this illegal makeshift hospital in the middle of the desert. And from there the story develops, and things quickly unravel and escalate as Ethan has to lie to his wife, who not only would be devastated to find out what he has done, but who also is a police officer and who's actually investigating who killed said refugee. He has to lie to his employee. He's telling them that his son has health issues and that's why he has to take time off of work, because he can't do it with working all day and then working all night and also spending time with his family. So things just really escalate very quickly. I really liked about this novel that Gundar-Goshen, she doesn't give you clear answers, and she doesn't give you clear good guys and bad guys. So Ethan, obviously, he took a moral stance at his former job, so he wants to be a good guy, but then at the same time he's done this horrible thing, running away from it. But then you wonder, if he saves all these refugees' lives now in this illegal makeshift hospital, does that make up for it? Does that make him a good guy again? Can a lot of acts of goodness balance out this one bad act? Or does it even count because he's not doing it voluntarily and he actually tells you that he rejects these refugees and that he's disgusted by them because he's been forced into this situation? So then you wonder, is Circuit the good guy in this story? And she not necessarily is, because it turns out she's not quite that upset that her husband died, because her husband was very violent towards her, and obviously she doesn't tell Ethan this, that in a way he kind of saved her, but you get that she has a more complex background. And it's interesting because she's from, I forgot, I don't know if the book mentions it, but I forgot which country she came from, if it mentions it, but it was sub-Saharan. And then at some point, obviously other people also found out about this makeshift hospital, and there's an Arab guy bringing a woman in who's like in a really troubled situation, and Ethan wants to help her, and Circuit says no, only our kind. So obviously she's not straight up good either. She doesn't want to help these other people because she perceives them as her enemies. So you really don't get clear good guys or bad guys in this, which I really enjoyed. And it was just also interesting to see how quickly the marriage between Ethan and his wife Liat seems to unravel. Something that seems to be stable in the beginning and throughout the story becomes challenged by the things that they face and the truth that will they come out or won't they. I'm not going to give away the ending of this novel, obviously, but I will say that I think the way Gundar-Goshen resolved this seemed realistic on who was going to carry what kind of burden going out of this situation. And so yeah, if anything that I said made you interested in this book, I would say check out Waking Lions by Ayelet Gundar-Goshen. Then the next book I read was Frankfurt for Beginners, and this is by Matthias Arning, and it has been illustrated by Eva Feuchter and translated by Jeremy Gaines. I will say this has absolutely beautiful illustrations, so I don't know if you can, I never know if you can see that, but I'll just try. It's all in this black and white and yellow design. And I will say, if you are going to Frankfurt for just a day or two, this is not the book for you, because this is not a do the major sites and then be done with the city kind of book. This book really delves into Frankfurt. It obviously also gives you the major sites, but it also talks about like sort of traditional institutions, if you will, like the Café Größenbahn, which is a popular coffee shop where intellectuals and politically interested people met. And it obviously also includes the Frankfurt Book Fair, which is a really important aspect of Frankfurt. And yes, it just has a lot of tales about things like food, architecture and history of Frankfurt. So if you're really interested in the city, you want to get to know it better, this is the book for you. And what I really liked is it also doesn't shy away from some of the darker aspects of the city's history. So for example, the last execution that took place in Frankfurt is being mentioned, and that was in 1772, and it was Susanna Margareta Brandt who apparently killed her newborn child. And she was the last woman to be, or person to be executed in Frankfurt. And it also talks about the company IG Farben, which was back in the 1930s and 40s a big chemical and pharmaceutical company in Germany that has now become infamously associated with the Nazi regime because they produced the Zyklon B that was used as a poisonous gas to kill a lot of the Jews in the Holocaust. And they also very heavily relied upon slave labor from the concentration camps. So I like that this book didn't shy away from Frankfurt's darker sides as well. So again, if you're looking for a quick guide to the city, this is not it. If you want to delve deeper into Frankfurt, I would recommend this. And I should add, the way that this is set up is that you always have like small chapters of 2 to 5 pages that give you some information on different sides of the city. So yeah, then the third book I read in the month of March was a very tiny little booklet, and that was The Suffragettes. And for such a tiny book, I think I gotten a lot out of this. So this is a collection of pamphlets, speeches, press clippings, etc., all to do with the suffragettes movement. You have this split into 3 parts, the first one being suffrage, the second one being anti-suffrage, and the last one being victory, because obviously they won and they earned the women their vote. And even though it's such a tiny book, I managed to learn some new things. So for example, I had no idea that the suffragettes, when they were imprisoned, were actually being force-fed, because a lot of them went on hunger strikes, and they were brutally force-fed with having tubes shoved down their throats, and I thought that was really horrific. I also didn't know about the so-called Cat and Mouse Act. So as I said, these women would starve themselves in prison, and once they were too sick to be kept in prison because of that, they were released. But as soon as they got better, the police was allowed to charge them again for the same crimes as before, and to re-imprison them. And so that's why it was sort of this catch and release thing, was called the Cat and Mouse Act, was referred to as that. And I don't know, especially with the anti-suffrage part, this was both funny and sad at the same time. It was sad in the way that a lot of women were also anti-suffrage, and I'm thinking, like, even if you don't want women to have the vote, just don't go and vote yourself if they get the vote. But why do you have to take it away from other women who are fighting for this? So that was just kind of sad. And then I also thought it was so ironic, because they give you like reasons why women can't vote, and one of them is because the complex modern state depends for its very existence on naval and military power, diplomacy, finance, and the great mining, constructive shipping, and transport industries, in none of which can women take any practical part. And it's just so funny to think that back then people thought and really believed that. And I mean, as we know now, women do take an active part in these fields, and it's just in that sense ridiculous. Another thing that was both funny and sad is this picture of a crying baby, and it says "Mummy's a suffragette" underneath. So it seems ridiculous, but at the same time people took that very seriously. And then my favorite quote from this was from a speech given by Emmeline Pankhurst, and it says, "Women are very slow to rouse, but once they are aroused, once they are determined, nothing on earth and nothing in heaven will make women give way. It is impossible." So that's probably the favorite quote I took from this. So yeah, that was The Suffragettes. So the fourth book I read in the month of March was Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine. And before I say anything about the book, I'm gonna link to Jennifer's review of it from Inside Literature Pun here, because there's no way I can do as comprehensive and as good a job as she did. And I think she accurately pointed out the strengths and the flaws of this novel in her review. So Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine is obviously about the character of Eleanor, who works in an office and is a rather lonely figure, and the only interactions she really has are with her very abusive mother once a week on the telephone for 15 minutes. And it becomes clear early on in the story that Eleanor has went through some sort of trauma. She has a scar in her face, and that her mother is associated with that trauma, and for that reason can't be in touch with her daughter in person, but they still talk on the phone, and you just want her not to. And then the thing is, Eleanor is very isolated. She's not very good at picking up social cues, and she doesn't really like to interact with her co-workers, and they don't really seem to like to interact with her either. But then two things happen that sort of take her out of her shell. One is she falls in love with a musician she sees somewhere, and she decides that's going to become her boyfriend. He's going to become her boyfriend, and she's working on changing her appearance and trying to do things in a way that is going to attract him. And the other thing is that she walks out of the office building at the same time as the IT guy Raymond, and they walk out and there's this elderly man who falls on the street, and she rather reluctantly, but she ends up together with Raymond helping this guy whose name is Sammy. And they end up visiting him in hospital a couple of times and afterwards as well. And Eleanor makes friends with, especially with Raymond, but also with Sammy, and that sort of gets her more out of her shell. But Eleanor also struggles. So before these interactions, when she describes her weekends, so throughout the week she has her office job and she seems to be alright with that. But the weekends she numbs herself into a stupor by drinking bottles and bottles of vodka. And this is where the novel somewhat lost me, because for a lot of things that happen in this book you kind of really have to suspend your disbelief, and to an extent I wasn't necessarily willing to do. So for example, one big issue I had, and Jennifer talks about it in her video as well, is that she has this huge alcohol problem apparently. But then at some point she decides to stop, and she just clearly stops drinking at that moment. She doesn't buy any more bottles, she doesn't have a relapse or anything, and it just didn't seem realistic. And then, as I said, because she's been traumatized, she's not very good with social cues. And Jennifer gives the example of the air quotation marks that she has seen one of her office co-workers do, and then she stores it for later reference for using it correctly in a social context. And as Jennifer points out, is that seriously the first time she's ever seen somebody use the air quotation marks? But one thing that I thought was even more jarring was that she learns to high five. And I mean, at this point of the novel, she has studied, and you know, she does read books and everything, even though she is not very capable of distinguishing what are books she likes or what are topics that are important to her that she should read about. But I mean, come on, she's gonna have seen somebody do a high five before. It just seemed a bit unrealistic in the way it was depicted. And I listened to this on audiobook, and I really enjoyed the narrator, by the way. For that it was worthwhile to keep listening. This is set in Scotland, in Glasgow, and the narrator really used the Scottish dialect, and I really enjoyed that. And the author does a little interview at the end of the novel with the audiobook narrator, and she talks about how she set the book in Glasgow because she lives in Glasgow, knows the city well, and therefore didn't have to do much research. And I get that, and I think for the setting it worked really well, and the setting, the descriptions I enjoyed. But again, with the lack of research, you wonder, did she research properly how traumatized people behave, and how people who struggle to navigate social issues or circumstances behave? And I'm just not sure that she really put as much thought into that as she maybe should have. So yeah, I don't know. For me, this novel was more of a miss, but I don't know. I guess I'm still somewhat glad I read it. I now know what all the fuss was about. I can't say I'm completely joining the praises. It was alright for me. It wasn't anything special. The author wants to explore the theme of loneliness in this novel, and I guess she did that to a certain extent, so she got that covered. I just think she could have approached it differently. I will say a book that I think deals with socially awkward character much better is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, which was the first book I read this year and which I enjoyed infinitely more. So if anything, check out that novel. So yes, that is all I have for my first part wrap up for the month of March. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next time.